Welcome to today's meeting of the Police and Crime Panel. I'd like to remind all present that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and welcome to anyone watching at home. Could those present please ensure that all devices are set to silent or switched off where possible. Finally, I would like to welcome the Commissioner and officers from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and thank them for their attendance today. Before I move into the main agenda items, there are two matters, or certainly one particular matter now, we'll move on to the other one in a second, that I'd like to raise. I'm proposing to change the order of the main agenda items to swap items 2 and 3 so that we will discuss the constabulary budget considerations ahead of the strategic approach to commissioning and grants. Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much. Agreed. So we'll first go into the preliminary items on the agenda. So apologies for absence. Pippa.
Apologies for absence have been received from Claire George, Councillors Butel, McNally, Kerr and Whelan.
Thank you very much. If we could just make a note of those we haven't had confirmation from that aren't here, that's really helpful. Thank you. And just at this point, obviously Councillor Kane isn't here. So she has replaced Councillor Bradman as sort of the main attendee for this meeting. But I would just like to say on record, just thank you for Councillor Bradman's attendance over her time here and for her contributions to the panel. So that's very much appreciated. Thank you. Declaration of interest. Is there any declarations of interest to raise? Thank you very much. Minutes of previous meeting. Are members in agreement that the minutes of the previous meeting are accurate? Has everybody had an opportunity to look at the minutes? We'll take those as agreed. Thank you very much. And then review of actions, recommendations from the previous meeting. Commissioner, are there any actions or recommendations raised at the previous meeting that you would like to review?
Good afternoon, Chair and panel. Thank you, Chair. As per usual, there were a number of not recorded but soft actions that I said and my team said we would take away. I will give a brief summary. Perhaps maybe before I start, if I echo your appreciation for Councillor Bradnam. She's been here since the start on my watch. I think it's fair to say she's offered some real challenge, but also some real support as well. So please note that as well. So there were a few things, Chair. Firstly, it was Councillor Bradnam asked about engagement issues between South Cambs Safety Partnership, local policing teams, and particular delay with a protection public order notice in Milton Park and Ride. That has progressed. She has received an update directly, and I've seen in the local media that that's now progressed to a good place. Councillor Warren asked last time around charities, which were part of the rehabilitation programme. I understand my office has been in touch with you. Clearly, this is an area that we need to work very closely with prison and probation with, and I share your passion in relation to the rehabilitation. Councillor Tong, you asked about the extra 215 stop searches. As that wasn't part of the Home Office return, I can't talk specifically to those 250. What I can talk to is specifically about the wider force performance. There was over 3,000 stop and searches recorded last year. That equates to around 10 a day by my simple maths. Of those, 45% resulted in a positive result, whether that was arrest, whether that was some other kind of resolution. In other words, something was found. The national average is 30%, and we can all take a different view on what that means. Actually, are we doing enough here in Cambridgeshire? Are we not doing enough? Are we doing it better in Cambridgeshire or are we not? I don't have the answer to that, but I will be raising it with the Chief Constable and ask for an explanation. Councillor Todd Jones asked what work was taking place in relation to business crime. There has been some quite intense activity from the constabulary and indeed over the years from my office. The constabulary now has spree offending teams across all areas. These are officers who target particularly crimes like shoplifting in our high street businesses. Both Cambridgeshire and Peterborough have seen some real success in that area. Councillor McNally asked about the disposal of nitrous oxide canisters. I believe a member of my team put the councillor in touch with another area who are doing some really good work around this. Another question from Councillor Bragman asked whether councillors had access to road safety data. The answer is yes, there is a dashboard, and that information was given directly to the councillor. Councillor Tong, you asked, had there been engagement with businesses regarding poor driving by delivery drivers? I've asked the police that matter, particularly Cambridge City Police, and they say they are regularly targeting antisocial driving as part of their community priorities. And I think you will also notice, though not the delivery drivers, have been a real significant increase on the crackdown on illegal use of e-scooters, and that's been made quite publicly aware as well. And Councillor Warren, another one was due was to ask around the quality of calls is assessed in addition to the response time. A lot of work, I've received an update on this, there is a lot of quality assurance in relation to those calls, and you're quite right to point out, it's not necessarily how quick we answer calls or get to incidents, it's what a good job is actually done on that. So those are the soft actions. There are a couple of updates, Chair, if you would like me to do on significant recent events.
Yes, please. That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
So, panel, we'll all be aware that we in this county suffered an abhorrent incident on the 1st of November, which resulted in multiple casualties on a train having left Peterborough and stopped at Huntingdon. First and foremost, my thoughts, and I'm sure thoughts of all of us, are with the victims, the families, local communities, and other persons on that train, everybody that was impacted by this shocking, abhorrent event. I would like to thank Cambridgeshire Police and British Transport Police for that immediate response. I think it's been widely reported. The response time was remarkable, but also perhaps underreported was the way that that suspect was detained. It wasn't lethal, and therefore, you know, justice hopefully will be served in due course. Out of that incident, though, and reported in the press, we know that there were other incidents reported previously to the police. You will also be aware that the suspect has been charged with a number of offences, including attempted murder. So there's not much more I can say on those proceedings because they are now part of the criminal proceedings process, and it would be wrong for me to comment on those. But I did at the time ask the Cambridgeshire Chief Constable to do a thorough review of events before the 1st of November. He is committed to do that, and that is ongoing. The constabulary, as a result of that, have referred themselves to the Independent Office of Police Complaints in relation to one of the incidents. That is a process that would be usual, and the IOPC are investigating that. I will say no more on that matter because obviously that is part of an ongoing investigation as well. In relation to the report that I commissioned and said that it would be in the public domain via my reporting, and I could indeed bring it back to this panel, I won't give a time date as to when that is going to be completed based on the fact that the criminal proceedings and the IOPC investigation must take precedent. But once again, and I didn't mention there, of course, I mentioned the fast and immediate response of the police, but I think what really saved life and limb on that day was the brave actions of people on that train and the train staff, widely reported. There are heroes amongst us. I think on that day we saw both the worst and best of humanity. Chair, I will move on to just another matter, which was the announcement on the 13th of November to abolish police and crime commissioners and indeed police and crime panels as of 2028. I'm not going to say an awful lot on this on account of the fact that in this county, the direction would always be with possibly with the combined authority. It's always been the case, and the views of the previous government and this government, that policing powers at some stage would go into that combined authority and into the mayoralty system. So perhaps the impact on us here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough isn't so significant. I also have committed publicly and continue to commit that I and my team will work as hard as we always have done to ensure that we deliver against the police and crime plan. But most importantly as well is that those services we commission This came as a bit of a shock to them. You know, these are people employed by charities, and there's a significant amount of people who were rather nervous about this sudden announcement and what comes next, particularly outside of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, where the government are talking about boards which will replace police and crime commissioners. Look, I understand many people have different views on the role of the police and crime commissioner. What I would say, though, is that the reasons given by government for abolishing police and crime commissioners, I believe, and I've always believed in dealing with facts. And I hope that you would have seen that over the past few years. I deal with facts. I won't go and start talking to the media until I have the facts. I'm not sure the facts are actually the same as the reasons given by government, but I don't intend to go through that here. Perhaps the most disappointing part of it is that we were told literally minutes before a ministerial announcement in the Houses of Parliament. Now, I'm a politician. I've got a contract till 2028, but I have members of staff. We have those commission services, and I just don't think that's the way that you treat people who are working hard to deliver for our communities. But as I say, that's the update. We will continue to support our services, and I will work with the Mayor, Paul Bristow, for a smooth transition at the right time for us all. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Commissioner. If it's okay with the rest of the panel, we won't ask any questions today. I appreciate, obviously, in terms of the last part of your update of the PCC transition, what does that look like? It will all start to unpack itself over time in terms of timelines and what does that look like and what does it mean for all of us here. But I would just like to say, really, on behalf of this panel, past and present, and you're aware that the chair is not able to be here today, but I have spoken to her. We would just like to say that we see the role of the Commissioner, the panel, and the work that we have to do is undeterred. We have a very good relationship here in Peterborough and Cambridge, and you have our full support as we move forward. And we just want to sort of put on record there, thank you for your efforts and certainly for your candour this afternoon. It's very much appreciated. And also just to put on record, and thanks to the Chief Constable and Cambridgeshire Police and all Blue Light Services and the public that stepped in on the 1st of November. As you said, it was a very horrendous incident. And I know the police bravery and their swift action ultimately would have saved, many other serious injuries. So thank you very much for your honesty and your candour and your update. Okay, so we then move into any questions or statements from members of the public, Pippa.
There were none received for this meeting.
Thank you very much. So we'll then move into the substantive items. And the first one is the Police and Crime Plan thematic pillar update supporting victims and witnesses.
Thank you, Chair. I won't take too long here. Obviously, the paper has been distributed, and I have Nikki from the OPCC with me, who is a bit of a subject matter expert in this area. So this is the fourth deep dive paper into the pillars contained within the Police and Crime Plan, and this is the work that we're all doing to support victims and witnesses. I think it's worth mentioning here that this is obviously an actually bolt on to the responsibilities of Police and Crime Commission from when they were initially introduced. But it's one that I have really welcomed, and it is an area that I'm really passionate about. And that's very easy to say, and we heard it said a lot about victims and witnesses. This panel will be aware. I mean, I was in policing myself. I specialised in protecting vulnerable people, so that's child abuse, sexual offences, adult abuse, domestic abuse. You cannot do that job and be passionate about victims and witnesses. So this isn't just about a statutory responsibility. This is about a passion for ensuring the very best services are out there. Since 2021, when I've been in post, I have invested more than £12.5 million into services in our county. And just to explain what that looks like. So we have within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough our own victims services hub, the Victims and Witnesses Hub. And I believe we were one of the first to come away from a national model of delivery. That's been reviewed a number of times, and those reviews have always come back really, really positive on the work they do. It's sometimes difficult to actually nail down, the performance of these units when you compare them nationally. But I think a good indicator is that I know that a lot of other areas and police forces come to Cambridgeshire to look at our victims and witness hub to see what they do. And I think that's a good indication. What I can say is I have regular meetings with the team there as well, and the head of the unit. They are passionate people carrying out that role. And of course, they are not the police. They are separate from the police. You don't just have to be a victim of crime that's reported it to the police. You can self-report, and that does happen as well. Of course, the victim services, some of the key responsibilities to ensure that people live in our county can access support from local organisations staffed by local people. And I think that's important as well, that where we can, we are using some of those local based rather than some of the bigger national, although there is some crossover with some of the nationals as well. Just to break it down in a couple of areas. So I've talked about our victims and witness hub. They have a wide remit around lots of crime types, but we also have some specialist services as well, which are really important to me. Violence against women and girls and the holding to account. So as part of my holding to account role, we scrutinise. Gone the wrong way there, haven't I? No. Okay. So sorry. Back to the violence against women and girls and the holding to account. So we scrutinise the constabulary in relation to this at our regular and formal. And I don't want to repeat that because we've done deep dives and thematic inspections, and I've come back to this before. But this is a really important area. So we have received significant financial amounts from government, particularly Ministry of Justice, working with local authorities. We have what I think is an excellent IDVA. These are the Independent Domestic Violence Abuse Support, and ISVAs, which are the Sexual Violence Advisors. One of the problems there, of course, is that it's always cliff edge funding. But where I can, I will always, take that risk to ensure that we can give as long a term as possible, because these are really, really important. I actually talked about the VAW part and the sexual offences, and that is an area that I am passionate about in relation to victims and witnesses. In relation to police and crime commissioners and our roles, is that we have national responsibilities as well, if we choose to take them, like MPs. Mine, I think I might mention it before, is forensics and biometrics. Perhaps not as exciting to some people as some of those other areas, but it's massively, massively important. If it goes wrong in forensics and biometrics, then the criminal justice system fails. So as part of my role in that, not just the wider forensics, I'm actually chairing and leading on the what we call the SARCs, the Sexual Assault Referral Centres. We have a fabulous facility here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We will retain that facility. This is a facility that those who report sexual offences to the police, men and women, can be taken to. It's not just forensic, it's clinical. So they will get all the support services from a clinical perspective as well. But also people can self-refer to these sexual assault referral centres as well. So you've had the paper. I am passionate about this. Nikki is here. If there are any in detail questions, then very happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Are there any questions at this point from anybody? Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah, thanks very much for the report. And I noticed that I think 5.4 and 5.8 and 5.9 particularly talk about support for victims of domestic abuse and the support local services regarding violence against women and girls, and a lot of great work is going on. But if I can, given that this is White Ribbon Week, and actually I'll be attending an event at Cambridge United, sorry Chris, on Saturday, where we're really publicising for all fans, but particularly men, how they ought to be calling out any incidents of even suggestions of violence against women and girls. So we're really trying to publicise White Ribbon Week and trying to get everyone to pledge support if at all possible. But what I'd like to ask particularly is about the Freedom Programme, which you may be aware of. It's very specialist support for survivors of domestic abuse. In Cambridge, we run it at the Meadow Centre Family and Children's Wing, which is in my ward, Arbury. Also, the Cambridge Women's Resource Centre run a programme too. But there's very patchy support across the county. As I understand it, in both Fenland and East Cambs, there's no Freedom Programme support in terms of this specialist help for victims of domestic abuse. I don't think there's current funding in South Cambridgeshire either. This means that a lot of resources have to be utilised in Cambridge from across the county. And I'm just wondering, I believe there is a programme in Huntingdon and here in Peterborough. And I'm just wondering whether the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner could commit to funding, at least in 26-27, and clarify whether you have funding at the moment in this current financial year. So I believe that's the case, but I'm not absolutely certain of that. But there's a huge shortfall in funding. We in Cambridge City Council support the Freedom Programme as much as possibly can, but it's a massive shortfall in terms of the need out there. So some commitment to topping up or really supporting funding from the Office of the Police and Crime Commission would be really welcome. So I would be grateful if you could comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, this is an area that I am very, very keen to support where I can. A general view just on the funding. Clearly the monies that I have that are directly for policing are for policing. A lot of the victims grants that we get are from the Ministry of Justice. You can imagine I will lobby along with other police and crime commissioners and local authorities for continued funding in relation to tackling and then dealing with victims and survivors of domestic abuse and sexual violence. You mentioned the Freedom Programme and the Meadows. I've been there myself personally on a couple of occasions. Fantastic people there doing some fantastic work and very keen to support them. But it'd be remiss of me not to bring Nikki in just to give you some more detail and clarity on some of those wider questions around additional support across the county.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I think I'm working this time. It's really interesting you asked that question actually about the Freedom Programme, because I was talking to your colleagues at Cambridge City Council along with the County Council only this week. So there are 3 different group work programmes that are delivered across our county, because we recognise that survivors of domestic abuse are all at very different stages in their journey. So actually, while the Freedom is one of the best known programmes, it isn't the only one that's available. For example, in Peterborough, they run one called Oh My Life, and then there's some other more bespoke ones that are delivered by community-based organisations as well. It is important to have a group work offer. But it's also really important to ensure that we're doing this in partnership with our colleagues, because it isn't just the Police and Crime Commissioner's responsibility to do this. And in fact, Peterborough's outreach service does have a group work offer. And one of the conversations I've been having with Cambridgeshire is whether that could be extended. We've also just run a small grants round, which the Commissioner awarded some small amounts of money, and we did just put some extra funding into group works. And in fact, the Meadows was one of the recipients of that funding, as was a small charity in Peterborough called Living Keys. And also we're having conversations with another organisation based in Huntingdon called the Angel Foundation. But what we do recognise is there are gaps in services, because there is a tier of service provision which is very place-based. This relies on local charitable organisations working in partnership with the people who live there to actually design services that suit them. So we have previously tried to commission group work county-wide, and the Commissioner's invested funded into that, which hasn't been as successful as we'd anticipate. So what we're trying to do next year is to actually build community capacity to respond to that. And actually in the budget ring fence for next year is funding for community work and to build that community resilience. And you'll see the evidence of where we started that. The Commissioner awarded funding to One Voice for Travellers this year. We also awarded funding to the Cambridge Deaf Association, and we were one of the lion's share funders for the Meadows in Cambridge, which you referred to. So I think it's just a reassurance this is something we talk about on a regular basis. But finally, we only get one grant from the Ministry of Justice, and it has to be spread across every single service that we fund. PCC is responsible for all crime types, and victims of all crime deserve a response, which is why we have our excellent victim and witness hub. So I think the reassurance is this is something we're looking at. We're working in partnership to look at, and it will remain on our agenda for the coming year.
Thank you very much. Anybody got any other questions? Councillor Tong, then I'll come to Councillor Warren.
Hello, is that working? Yes. So, firstly, thank you for this report. I think justice has a very strong connotation with this kind of retributive element, but trying to make sure we get justice for the victims of crime, I think is probably the most important thing we're doing. It's really important that we're making sure victims of crime get the support that they deserve. I was hoping you could elaborate a bit more on the Victim Services Grant. There's a really, really nice graph on page 21 of the overall document pack, which breaks down funding streams very, very nicely. This isn't actually related to that before you turn to that page. What I'm specifically asking about, though, is looking at the Victim Services Grant within a wider historical context, because you acknowledge here that this grant isn't subject to inflationary increases. So, unfortunately, as with many of our services, I imagine we've seen our ability to respond to this suffer over time because the amount of money we're getting is, in real terms, decreasing, unless I'm misunderstanding. So I was wondering if you could explain a bit more about how much it has decreased over time. Would you be able to set some sort of benchmark on a historical figure and try and explain quite how much inflation has affected this grant?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll hand over to Nikki just to give you the absolute detail. But you're right, because actually these services, let's be frank, this is about people. This is about people doing a job and supporting victims and survivors, and those people, quite rightly, are subject to pay rises and national insurance contributions, etc., etc. And so we do find that a challenge. We absolutely do. Perhaps just one challenge. You said that justice is probably the most important thing, and I completely understand that. I would not want justice. For me, just going back to the other pillar of my plan, preventing it from happening in the first place, that's where we really want to be, and prevent any further. Having dealt with domestic abuse cases myself, sometimes a judicial or justice outcome is not what you're going to get to, but keeping that person safe and giving them a better future is probably where I would be. That would be my priority. But Nikki, if you would like to give some detail on some of the financials.
Right, what I can't do today is give you the maths, because each year changes all the time. But what I can do is give you a general overview of how it works. And then if there's any of the maths or modelling you want us to do, we can bring that back. So what I don't want to do is guess. So Victim Services transferred over to Police and Crime Commissioners in about 2014, 2013. We were part of the early adopter group, actually working with the Ministry of Justice to tailor the work. So since then, we did go on a trajectory of the funding going up, and it sort of settled around about 900,000, 980,000 that we got. And that's our core grant. That's what we get that rolls every single year. But what you'll see in Cambridgeshire figures is a much inflated version of figures, because we've actually been really successful at bidding for extra funding. So in Cambridgeshire, we're one of only 5 areas that brings down, and I can't remember the figure at the top of my head, but it's just under £400,000 for our rape and sexual abuse services, which actually in other areas they have to bid direct for. And in Cambridgeshire, it's devolved to us. And what we do is use it as part of our commissioning approach so that we can actually commission a county-wide support service, so that we can ensure we've got an equitable approach wherever you live. The council before was referencing about inequitable service provision, and that's something we strive to achieve. So we also had a lot of inflated money during COVID. So during COVID, we had 3 to 4 years of extra funds that we had to bid in for, and we brought quite a large amount of money down into Cambridgeshire, which was last year rolled into a single grant called the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Grant. So if we're looking at about 2.2 million coming into Cambridgeshire for victim services, which is quite high for for us, for a small shire county. What we don't see is a year-on-year guarantee that we're going to get that money, and nor do we ever see that service, that actual amount go up. So we have to be really cautious that when we're modelling our spends, that what we're not doing is modelling right up to the letter that doesn't allow for future years for increases. So one way we do this is with our tender processes. We will have, say we go out for a tender for a single budget envelope for 3 years, say it was £300,000 for an argument. We would be asking our provider to model under 100 in the first year to allow increments for staff increases all through the next 3 years. So there's quite a few things we do using a commissioning approach to try and ensure that our providers can actually get fair pay for what they do. So happy to go away and do some modelling for you. But in a reality, our reality is we do everything we can to ensure the providers get what they need to deliver the services. But as you'll see in the strategic commissioning and grants paper, there are at times where we have to decommission services. And that might be because we simply don't have the funding available.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councillor Warren, and then Councillor Jamil, and then Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I have actually got 2 questions, if that's okay. So the first one is kind of in 5.4. Obviously, congratulate you with all the work that you're doing with the domestic violence and domestic abuse. But I want to kind of touch on what kind of support you are doing for the ethnic and the minority sections of what they are with the victims of their support, because I don't see any really of what is happening to kind of tailor that support towards the ethnic and the minority support of people of domestic violence. So I'll do that first question.
And it's important because I think we all recognise, that needs may differ in our different communities. Before I hand over to Nikki once more, there's just 2. We mentioned them actually. One Voice for Travellers, and I've met with them, and it was really interesting to hear the challenges that they have in that community. The Cambridge Death Association, I went and visited them. I wasn't aware, just how more vulnerable. I mean, it's obvious it would be more vulnerable with perhaps with a disability. But the statistics are shocking. It's almost like you're twice more likely to be a victim of domestic abuse or crime if you're hearing impaired. So that's why I continue to support them. But obviously there is wider work across our communities. Nikki, is there something you want to come in?
Yes, I think what I was talking about earlier is that commissioning support services is a partnership approach. So something that we see that we're part of a wider integrated model of support services for the entire county. So it's not just what funding we put in, but it's funding that our partners put in, our third sector colleagues are successfully secure. So that's the wider model across the county. During COVID, we had some enhanced funding for some very specialist posts who worked in our domestic abuse services and our sexual violence services, who carried out outreach into our communities to encourage people who are seldom heard from to report, seek support. And interestingly, I was on a contract meeting only last week with our countywide support service for survivors of rape and sexual violence. That's Cambridge Rape Crisis and Peterborough Rape Crisis Delivering Consortium. And one of the things they said, we look at all sorts of data coming across, and they were showing us the demographics of people who access their services. And what they were able to tell us that even though their post, which was a specialist post supporting minority ethnic groups, was no longer doing that proactive outreach work because they're back being what we would call a day-to-day ISFA, they are still seeing a high number of people access their services. And they were trying to understand why that was. We think they are assuming it's building trust and confidence in communities, that people have trust that they can come there and receive support. So we're seeing the legacy of some of those posts. And also we've got some really amazing services that Peterborough Women's Aid have secured funding for themselves. There's the Dahlia Project, which won a recent Peterborough award, a business award. I saw that last week. And also they fund a Lithuanian support worker for domestic abuse, and there's also various specialist outreach work going on through Cambridge Women's Aid as well. So it's a sort of a whole system approach rather than just the funding that comes through us, which I think enables everybody to access support that meets their needs.
Thank you. And my second question is all about cuckooing, because I don't see anything about victims cuckooing, which is all about victims of disabilities and everything else. And what is the kind of victim support that we're doing with these most vulnerable of our communities that are getting cuckooed in those situations and being exploited in all systems and manners of ways? And can we see what we're doing about supporting those people that are victims of cuckooing?
Just before we answer, Commissioner, does everyone know what cuckooing is? Is everyone happy with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No, it's a really good question. Obviously forms part of the wider serious and organised crime profile within our county, and it's not just Peterborough that we see that. In the first instance, there is a multi-agency, so this isn't just about a follow-up victim support service. There is a multi-agency response, and we've seen that here in the Clear Build Hold programme and projects that's been done here in Peterborough. So in the first instance, this is around policing local authority response. Longer term, that's when that these other services can then come in, and that would include our own services that we've already talked about, because they are a victim of crime potentially. So our victims absolutely would be part of that. Is there any specific detail?
I think any support offered to victims of what's described as cuckooing would need to be offered in partnership depending on who the lead agency was. Safeguarding would be the priority and ensuring they're safe, and it would depend on the nature of the victimisation and also on their preference as how they'd want to accept support and if they indeed did. But we'd probably coordinate that through our victim and witness hub, and they would have access to services depending on the needs that they had. But we don't have a dedicated service to victims of cuckooing.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. Darryl, you'll probably pass it on to Nikki anyway, yeah. 5.4, you talk about the service, the victims, and it refers to 742 referrals, and we supported 588 victims. Now, I'm just interested, the other 150 odd that didn't take up our service, do we know why they didn't? Was it because of, they didn't feel comfortable? Do we keep those type of statistics, or what actually happened, or did they say thank you but no thank you?
I could certainly give that a stab and a view, but I'm going to hand to my colleague to give you the facts, which I'd much prefer to deal with.
I think what we do know, it's not because we didn't contact them in a timely manner. So that's the really positive news story that comes out of this service that we've been able to pilot. We don't know why. There's going to be a variety of reasons. Some people report domestic abuse to the police, and this is a domestic abuse. This service is for people who've reported to the police. Doesn't mean that they'll then progress with that report. It doesn't mean they're ready to accept support. I mean, I think we've all seen it's very common knowledge the number of times it takes a domestic abuse survivor to actually accept that they are a domestic abuse survivor. So these referrals come in. What we don't do is ring them back and say, why did you not want our support? So it is really difficult, and we have to rely on the expertise and knowledge of our specialist domestic abuse workers. And often they say, they're just not ready. We have to be there when they need us, not when we're ready to offer support to them.
Chair, can I just because I was going to say, is there any follow-up? Or do we leave a number with them? Do we leave, something to say when you're ready, when you're going to, and it would be just good to know that how many people then later on say, well, actually, I need this support. Can I get some? If I know maybe you can't do it today, but it'd be good to see if we do anything with that, and if there are any statistics around that.
I think it's fair to say where it's safe to do so, we will leave information. The officers, when they go out to domestic abuse crimes, if it's safe to do so, will speak to victims about the Bright Sky app, which they can put onto their phone, which has lots of local services available. They also do leave them with information there and then. But it's about what's safe to be left in the household and whether the perpetrator's still living in the house. Because what we can't do is actually increase their risk at all.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Thank you very much. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at a point 5.9 and Operation Soteria. There's a little paragraph there that said the continued rollout of training through Operation Soteria to officers, shift handlers and call takers. I wondered how far through that process we were, what else there was to do, because it implies that there is more to come. And I wondered how we compared to other forces in the rollout of this this process, please?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll let Nikki come in a moment. I have had updates, both formally and informally, in relation to the wider issue, which I'll call RASU. These are rape and sexual assault cases, and the rollout of Opsateria. I think it's fair to say, I mean, Opsateria was modelled in one force and then upscaled. I think, you know, the Chief Constable would say that in Cambridgeshire we were doing a lot of what Opsateria involved already. So we were quite far down that track. So, for example, we've got dedicated specialist rape investigators and teams. I know that training has been rolled out, certainly all detectives and certainly all the specialist departments. I haven't got the most recent as to where we are with the training, but I think it's fair. This is not only a local priority, this is a national strategic policing requirement as well. So one that is reported to my office frequently, and one I know that the Chief Constable puts as a top priority. Nick, is there anything else?
I don't have the data on that. It was in the paper to the Business Coordination Board.
Yeah, so we can get that back, the most current data.
Thank you very much indeed. The recommendations are contained within the report on members in agreement. And I would just like to say, just from my perspective, and hopefully other members will agree, this deep dive in what's going on across Peterborough and Cambridge fills me with a lot of confidence that there is a significant amount of work going on. And I too have been in policing for a long time, I have been, and what I see going on here is, I think, a fantastic piece of work. So just want to say thank you very much indeed. Okay, we will move on now to...
I just have a quick follow-up, if that's possible. I know,
Please.
Nikki, you were talking about meetings you've had recently, I think, with City Council. I just wondered, is there a prospect that they will be followed up? And I know one of the concerns is that because of the patchy support I mentioned across the county, whether some kind of liaison with other local authorities and a pooled budget, maybe opportunity to target funding better, could be a way forward here. So I'm just exploring whether the meetings that you have been involved in can be followed up and we can try and get some progress on a perhaps more coherent approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a meeting I was invited to, and yes, we've committed to work with the County Council and your colleague at Cambridge City Council to follow this up and to actually have conversations with the districts in that area as well.
Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to the Cambridge Constabulary Budget Considerations paper, which I think is this going to be you, Phil?
Thank you, Chair. And my apologies, just a couple of things on that last item. Firstly, our victims and witness support hub, they do have volunteers working there, you know, giving up their own time. And I know people around this table have contacts locally and people that they know. When they are looking for volunteers, I think it's a really rewarding area, and we do need those locally. Perhaps the other thing as well, we talked a lot about shared services. We do a lot with the local authority and others. So as councillors, elected members around the table, when I know most of the votes are in relation to options, but please do consider these really important issues when we talk about local government reform. So I'm not sure they're right at the top of the agenda, but they are really, really important. And local government reform will impact this. So it's how we collectively ensure that doesn't happen. Apologies, Chair. Okay, moving on to budget considerations. Phil can do all the detail in an accountant type of way. I'm probably just going to come straight in with the doom and gloom a little bit, but temper that slightly. We see police forces across the country struggling, frankly. Demand is rising, and we could talk a lot about that, which is interesting because crime is generally falling. You know, so I think there is a question to be asked, you know, around that demand, why it is increasing. There are a number of factors, lots of social factors involved in that. And of course, the police still is the emergency service of last resort. When no one else will pick up the phone or deal with it, the police get called. And what I can see from both being in police and now holding the police to account, the police find it very difficult to say no. And I think the public would find it very difficult when the police do say no. But I do think with police reform and moving forward, I think there's going to be some very significant challenges moving forward in policing, not just here in Cambridgeshire, but across the country. Our communities, and I speak to lots of people, as you do, as elected members, they will tell us about visible policing. They will tell us about volume crime. And it's a very difficult argument to make to them. Well, actually, you are safer than you ever were when you don't feel it in your local communities. I do always like to point out this, though, that it's not just about bobbies on the beat. We do a fantastic job in our local policing teams, and we should be supporting our local policing teams. But we were just talking about, victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. That's not bobbies on the beat. They have a job, but these are qualified detectives and others and support staff. And I just want to make that point that there are a lot of people, but not just those on the front line. I digress slightly. We are going to be in challenging times. In Cambridgeshire, I think both the Constabulary Chief Finance Officer and Phil from the OPCC have done a really good job in balancing budgets previously. But looking forward, we are still looking at a deficit. And the reasoning is this, and it's detailed in the paper, but the cost of policing is largely around people. It's police officers and staff. I think, and I could be correct, it's around 80% once you add them all up, our collaborated units, our police officers, our staff. What we do know in Cambridgeshire, because the way to save money, make efficiencies, generally speaking, is to reduce headcount. Not least of which, during austerity, practically every bit of efficiency that could be taken out was. We collaborate. We're one of the most significant collaborative forces with Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire. That saved us many millions of pounds, but there's really very little where else to look other than people. So when we're looking at people, of course, none of us would want to lose police officers. And indeed, if we did lose police officers, we'll be penalised and fined by government because they are ring-fenced. We would actually have money taken away from us. And who would want to lose police officers? Of course not. That's what our communities want. But we are one of the lowest ratios of staff to police officers in the country as well. And in reality, and I can't speak for my new chief constable, but in reality, when we look at what needs doing in policing to make us more effective, quite often it's not police officers. You would have heard before about the call handling 101 system, where we've seen some fantastic improvement. Not police officers that are going to mend that. It's other people in those support roles, which is important as well. So I think when we look at those budgetary considerations, we are looking at people, and therefore we're somewhat at the mercy when it comes to, for example, pay rises. Of course, we want our police officers and staff to be rewarded for the very hard work they do, putting themselves on the line, keeping us safe, and I support that. But we constantly see that government, as previous in this one, will say that they will fully fund these. We don't get fully funded here in Cambridgeshire, and that's partly because of the mechanism that we get a core grant, which is just over half of our income, and then it's local precept. Generally speaking, government will work out on core grant. So it leads to some perversity that actually some forces in the country will get overpaid for pay rises, whereas in Cambridgeshire, we get underpaid for pay rises. And there are a number of other anomalies. Policing works a lot on overtime. Now, we could say that's about leadership and efficiency. The reality is, overtime is a significant feature in policing. Police officers never know what time they're going to go home because it depends what's in front of them. Overtime is clearly not scheduled into any of those NI or pay increase contributions as well. So that has to be found locally, and it all adds up to a significant amount of money. The other thing, of course, about policing is that we've seen a significant uplift in police officers, with 20,000 national, equated to over 200 here in Cambridgeshire. We have seen a very small increase under the neighbourhood policing guarantee as well, which is welcome. As those officers become more experienced, they will become more effective, but actually they will become more expensive as well. And that is not necessarily factored into government thinking. So it's incremental. Police officers, as in many other organisations, as they pass certain increments, get paid more. And I don't necessarily think that this is taken into consideration by the Home Office when awarding grants to forces, but will make big public statements like it's fully funded. It is not fully funded. Therefore, we have to find that locally. And I will finish off, Chair, in once again using this opportunity to talk about fair police funding. You will see it in the paper, and you will see a number of comparisons. Actually, those comparisons in the paper are made against our most similar forces, which I would argue is outdated as well. They're probably not our most similar forces. So actually, those figures are probably far less. I mean, if I was to pick a force out of the air like Durham or Cleveland, and if you looked at how much they were getting in grants towards their officers, if we had the equivalent here in Cambridgeshire, my chief constable would have many, many millions of pounds to spend on better policing and keeping our communities safe. That's the reality of it. Probably not so nice part of my job is obviously my role as Police and Crime Commissioner to set precept. And it's my job to come to you to discuss that, to put that before you, and to consult with the public. To some extent, this is a bit of a hospital pass from government in any case, because all the figures that will be published by government in relation to police funding will always have in the small print the assumption the Police and Crime Commissioner raises precept to the maximum. Look, I'm not overly political. I don't make politics my thing, but I am a conservative Police and Crime Commissioner. The last thing that I want to do is raise taxes unnecessarily. And indeed, I will get some challenge from some of my colleagues. But the reality is I will always do what's right for policing. I will always do what's right for keeping our communities safe. And if that means having to come to you, having surveyed, asking for that maximum, which, by the way, you don't quite know what that's going to be. And the other point is that the funding settlement from government, i.e. what we're going to get next April, we haven't got yet. And it's not due until the end of December, which is kind of crazy, isn't it? You couldn't run businesses like this. And actually, this government has taken a bit longer, but this is something that happens year after year. A few months before we get told how much we're going to get to run policing, that just doesn't make sense. This needs better thinking from government moving forward. Chair, if I may, I thought Phil's here. Is there anything you want to add? Or maybe just wait for questions around the detail of the paper, Chair?
Thank you. Is there anything you want to add at this point? If not, we'll go to questions.
Yeah, the paper speaks for itself, really. I think the key parts are the opening section, which just describes the commissioners and your responsibilities around setting the precept. There's some what I think is quite interesting, which the commissioners alluded to, comparative data in the numbers here around just what could be achieved if we receive funding that equivalent to an average nationally or average just amongst the comparative forces. It also highlights very clearly the kind of bang for the buck we get out of the funding we get in terms of the number of officers we get per £1 million of funding, and how many more or how many fewer we would get if we operated at a national average of about 116 officers, I think, from memory, less if we were just at the average. So in terms of what we achieve for the limited funding we get is actually quite outstanding. And yeah, I really just to reiterate that just how difficult this is. The level of expenditure that we have to go at, which is variable and discretionary, is about 20% of our total budget. And year on year, we get the headline numbers from the Home Office and from the government that there's going to be this award to policing. It's an average of 1.7% in real terms was the number they quoted from the spending review earlier this year. But once you start to strip out what the level of inflation is, our level of inflation, not the national level of inflation, that's a different number. And it's also not clear at all, and again alluded to in the paper, what is in and what is out. So we could have some really nasty surprises come December the 17th, supposedly. But happy to take any questions on the detail.
Thank you. And I just obviously note that the next panel meeting on the 28th of January is dedicated to the precepts. So we'll have that conversation. Obviously, by then we'll understand about the settlement on the 17th of December. But I meant to say the last item, and very relevant to this one, the challenge of finance is riddled throughout every conversation and every part of policing that we talk about in terms of so your paper's been very helpful to read, and at this point we'll take questions from panel members. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I was noticing in the paper, in addition to these things that you've already said, we've still got this ongoing problem of the population figures that our things are based on. So they're still using things from yonks ago to 2011. despite the huge growth in our area. I wondered how that actually impacted.
Yeah,
our
I mean,
budgets.
that's the
my first question.
single biggest issue we have really. So 2011, it's actually what we believe it is a slight enhancement to the 2011 census numbers. So the 2011 census was, I think, 805,000 people. I think it's 805,000. Our estimate is that they're probably using a population of about 825,000. But that equates to what they thought the population was in 2013, I believe. Our current population, the latest numbers, 934,000 people. So yeah, a huge, I think a 16% increase, 17% increase in population in that time. And yet the funding that we get is obviously not kept up anything like as much as it should do. Now, the funding we get is not just population based. The grant is based on the type of crime we have, the geography and the population. So there are a number of metrics in there. But I think most people could reasonably assume that population is probably the key driver of the level of crime in any particular geography. So you can see from that just how far behind we've fallen, given the growth in population over that time.
Commissioner.
Yeah, if I may just add a couple of things as well about the unfairness of this. So if you think about the percentage growth here in Cambridge, it's significant, really significant. My maths is around, since that population alone, I think the maths 10% or so. I let other clever people work that out. There are some parts in this country where population has actually decreased. Yet, that's come back to fairness. We're not being given a fair deal in this area. Now, I know this panel is supported as well, lobbying into government, letters into Home Secretaries and policing ministers around reviewing the core grant, the funding formula for policing. The last government promised to do it. They did not. Well, actually, they did do it, but it sat with number 10, and for political reasons, it was never acted upon. And the political reason is simply this: there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. Given that we are already the biggest loser, or one of the biggest losers, I don't think it can get any worse for Cambridgeshire. But as a point of fairness, I and some local MPs as well have lobbied that, okay, we get that's difficult. We think we get it's politically challenging, but at least put the numbers in. Put the correct numbers from the most recent, and that's come back to no as well, which I think is a bit shocking, really. And I'm not just blaming this government; it's happened previously as well. This is about fairness of funding. Of course, forces like the Met and West Midlands, I get they're going to get more. They have bigger deprivation, they have bigger issues, they have bigger problems. But I would say this: crime types have changed. It's not just those physical crime types which were the scourge of those areas. We have knife crime in Peterborough, but actually also the biggest crime type is fraud. We are as likely to be a victim of fraud as those people in deprived areas as well. These are some of the realities of a change in crime types. I'm not asking for equal. I'm asking for fair. It's not happening. My request to you, colleagues, in your sort of political capacity and within your groups, make the case. This isn't about politics. This is about getting fair funding for Cambridgeshire. And whilst I'm on the rant, I'm a school governor. And you will know from local authorities, we were one of the least funded per pupil funding in the country here in Cambridgeshire as well. Once again, places like London get far more. I understand why London would get more, but we're right down the bottom. And when we look at some of our communities, Fenland, for example, they're one of the lowest attainment rates per pupil. This just doesn't seem fair to me. And they're just two examples, policing and education.
Commissioner, thank you. Councillor Lean, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Jamal.
So my second question is with a great deal of sympathy. So listening to what you said, you don't know what you can precept yet. You don't know what your core grant is yet. They'll tell you that in December. And we have to agree the precept in the middle of January. In the past, you gave us all a detailed briefing about the contents of the decisions that have been made with the budget. And I think, I don't know if I'm speaking for everybody, but that would be appreciated. Although I'm not sure when we'll have time to fit that in because we're against the wire.
Just to clarify, do you mean the kind of individual cost lines that make up the budget? I'm not sure what you're referring to.
So we were briefed about the sort of key decisions that have been made.
Right.
It was an hour's discussion, using the decisions that we need to draw
Right.
the budget together prior to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's no, we can certainly do that because a lot of the budget work has been done. We've made an estimate of what the grant is likely to be, or potentially going to be, based on the spending review numbers that have come out. The uncertainty is exactly what that number is going to be, but also what is in and what's out. And there are a number of items that have previously been ring fenced and funded separately, which are now should be part of the core grant and will not be separate items anymore. Such as national insurance, pensions, uplift program, and things like that, and pay awards, and the extent to which they're now going to be included in the totality of the grant, as opposed to a separately identifiable number, which you could then tie back to what it's actually costing you. And that's what we don't know, or one of the things we don't know.
Thank you. Just a practical thing, can you, when you speak, just get slightly closer to the mic, please? I think the audios are struggling to pick some of it up. And I wonder whether what you've just asked there, Councillor, is that what we will deal with at the pre-hearing meeting that we have online ahead of the precept meeting? I don't know what the date is, but I wonder whether that's where that gets dealt with.
Yeah, so just to confirm, that'll be all in the papers that are coming for the precept meeting. And obviously, we'll have the pre-briefing early in January to try to give you the heads up in relation to all those. So what you're referring to is very similar to what we had last year around
Brilliant.
that and that data. So
Thank
hopefully
you.
we'll be in a position to do that if it's released in the time frame.
Thank you, Jack. And so I'll just encourage everybody to dial into that meeting. It will really be very helpful for the precept conversation. Thank you. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's just me, and I'll explain why. I'm from Peterborough City Council. We're one of the most poorly funded councils considering our comparators. I also sit on the Fire Authority, and guess what they say? Exactly the same. And now you're telling me the same with the police force. I do agree with you. A reset is needed. But my question today is around, you've got some idea of what you're going to get. You're not going to get the total amount. Are we going to need to raise the precept a lot around the same? Do you have any idea? I know that it's difficult to answer until we get that, but you must have some feelers as to where we're going or what the direction is.
Yeah. If we were to make assumptions about what that looks like, i.e. the maximum amount I can raise that to, we would still be in deficit. So the constabulary needs to make savings, even if I go for the highest rate. And what I just said, what are savings? There's very little to go after other than people. So the reality is, I will consult. Of course, we will look at the numbers. I would be very surprised if I or any other police and crime commissioner or deputy mayor for policing do not take the full precept based on the figures.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any other questions? Please. Yep.
You talked about LGR, and it's occupied a lot of our time. And with the disparity between council tax in different parts of the county, because I'm speaking as a Peterboroughan here, do you think it will have a big impact in terms of the precept for us, for Peterborough, on top of anything we may put up, I'd not say we're going to, in terms of what the police precept will be? And I asked the same question with the fire authority as well.
I could be delving into tricky territory here. Look, I'm talking about the police precept element of council tax, and I'm acutely aware of the varying levels of precept and some of the political issues around them as well. What I said is I will do the right thing. I will bring it to this panel. I will listen to your challenge. I will do the right thing. All the evidence and all the information and all the maths at the moment shows that we kind of make an assumption about what that precept limit's going to be, and we will need it all just to keep the lights on.
Thank you very much. There's one more question from Satinder.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at paragraph 5.2, I can see reference to collaboration with other forces. Under the duty to collaborate with all blue lights, has there been any consideration for co-location on your estates?
Yes. I'll say little more because obviously there's work being done there. It's not always that straightforward. We can have those conversations. Sometimes it's not a strategic fit, financial fit, or cultural fit. But those conversations are certainly being had and helped by, the chief fire officer is my ex-Phil. And so we do have good relationships with the fire service and the fire authority, which I never tried to come after and become and take as well. I hope you noted.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the recommendations are contained within the report. Are members in agreement? Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the strategic approach to commissioning and grants at agenda item number 3.
Thank you, Chair. And the panel would have had this report. And sometimes, I'd look at the strategic approach to commissioning and grants. It doesn't leap out as perhaps the most exciting thing. But when we were just talking about those services, all those services, they're carried out. And I know you all know this. I'm not teaching anyone psychics, but we have such a good service arrangements here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We do punch above our weight. We bring in more money than many others, but that's because of the fantastic work that's done in relation to the commissioning and monitoring of those grants. And that's thanks to Nikki and the team at the OPCC, along with some of our colleagues in the local authority. We do a fantastic job. And it's not just me saying that. We get our sort of monitoring and assessments around this, and we get excellent or very good assurance in relation to our commissioning and grants. Just a few facts that come out of here. So my team, and it is a small team, and interestingly here, any future, when we look at the future in relation to the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner, these functions will still be required. And even government have recognised that when they talked about their savings. A very small team of people manage a £6.7 million commissioning portfolio. You talk about 2 or 3 people. Across 54 separate awards across 41 providers, and to do that. And these providers, many of them, most of them are doing excellent work, but it might not be that their forte in relation to the monitoring, that they might not be really good at that. But my team help them through it as long as they're doing and delivering a good service. I mentioned one provider earlier, and I won't mention them again, but they need help with this, and quite rightly to deliver the services. And my team do exactly that. And of course, those commissioned grants, those grants cover a wide and varied range. I'm particularly focused on intervention, young people, and have been since I started this post. But we do rehabilitation of offenders, drug and alcohol treatment, community funds for those local issues, local problems, which are really important. But perhaps, and I said I wasn't going to bang on about this too much today, but perhaps one of the real positives about my role is that we've been able to be, really quite quick in that decision making. So there are a number of small grants. So firstly, obviously the big grants, the big ticket numbers, £1 million or so, there's a proper procurement process, which we would all expect. But those small grants, we can get out the door really quickly without hardly any bureaucracy, because I make that decision. I make that decision, based on strong and good advice from my team, and based on, the priorities of the Police and Crime Plan, which you've all seen and agreed to as well. Under authorities before and under these boards, I'm not sure how agile we'll be able to be in the future. And when it comes to some of those grants, they're needed, and they're needed now to make something happen. You can't wait till the next committee meeting. So I'm really proud of the work of the team themselves for doing it, and all our partners in delivering some of the many fantastic programs of work and projects that we do out there. Also, this is one of the really good bits of my job, because I go out and visit many of these people as well and see some of the fantastic work. Wisbeach Community Farm, I was there recently, if anyone is aware of that. It's basically providing alternative provision for some really, really challenged young people. And it was just amazing to see some of the people there, not just the charities that we are supporting, but actually just volunteers from the local community coming along as well. That's what will keep us safe. That young early intervention, prevention in the first place, and they've got really good outcomes. That's not 20,000 extra police officers. That's just some good thinking and some local good community work. I'll stop there. Any questions, and Nikki's all over this one as well.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Any questions? Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in the context of our sort of previous discussion about, I mean, I like the approach, the understand, the plan, the do, but interesting in understanding our approach, the partnership we've been talking about, co-commissioning arrangements, a pooled budget, working with 2 local authorities I mentioned here, but others, whether it's, and I don't make no excuse for mentioning White Ribbon Week again and why there is a focus today, I think, on domestic abuse and sexual violence, but that in terms of planning, as again in the report, equitable county-wide provision of services, I know it's difficult, budget challenges and funding challenges, but it's really a question about all those things that are in the approach, whether they can deliver more with what we've got. And I think that's what we're kind of trying to get at. And I'm sure we probably all agree with that approach. So I kind of welcome that approach and hope to see a lot more perhaps coming out of it.
Chair, for me, yeah, absolutely. It's got to be a whole system. It's got to be partnership, not just with the statutory agencies, but obviously with the third sector as well. We'll see in relation to devolution. We will see in relation to police reform that's going on at the moment. Actually, you know, there was an argument as well around my role, whatever that role looks like in the future, whether it's with mayors, and I'm generally supportive of the mayoral position, but actually probably more powers in relation to commissioning. So, for example, probation, you know, they commission. Should we not all be doing this together once for the right reason? Now, of course, we have a great relationship with probation. We talk to them, but really, you know, we probably, to get the best bang for our buck, should be doing this jointly. We kind of are anyway by default, but that only works where you've got good relationships and the politics work. I would be bolder from government, and I would say, actually, let's start looking at the wider system when it comes to commissioning services.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on this point? I've just got one question. It was just a matter of interest really for me. So it talks at 6.4 about new procurement process. In light of new procurement legislation, how new is it, and has it helped you or made the job more difficult?
Fairly new, but I will hand over to Nikki just to give some of the detail from HR.
So 2023 with the new legislation, and it's just working through. So any contracts that you've let on the old legislation follow through to the end date on that. And we're just getting used to it, to be perfectly honest, to see how it works and looking at the opportunities to be even more agile. But there is something that procurement has a place and a rightful place. But being able to transparently award grants is a really positive thing we can do. For example, the small grants round that I referenced earlier, that the Commissioner also referenced and was the person who has awarded them all, has enabled the Meadows in Cambridge will be able to take 12 people off their waiting list in tomorrow because we awarded the grant. I sent the email last night awarding the grant on the Commissioner's behalf, and they were told yesterday, and that we will get the money to them today, tomorrow. So that's about being really agile, but that's not always appropriate nor transparent when you're dealing with £1 million contracts. So we've currently got 3 processes in place at the moment that can take up to 5 months, even on the new legislation. We've just contracted award a specialist domestic abuse service. We've got the Commissioners chairing a market engagement event on Monday for a county-wide support service for young victims and witnesses of crime, where we're just going to market to see who's interested. And then we are currently drafting what's called a request for information to the market to see who'd be interested in delivering a programme the Home Office are wanting to fund in our area called Drive for high harm domestic abuse perpetrators. So at any one time, we've got quite a lot of different things we're juggling on top of all the really agile grant work as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And I think it just goes again to sort of showcase all the work that is going on, often behind the scenes within your office in support of policing, for the communities that we kind of serve and live amongst. So many thanks for that. Recommendations are contained within the report. Are members in agreement? Thank you very much. So we're now going to move on to the final item on the agenda, the forward plan. Jack, I believe you're going to be staying for that point. Commissioner and officers, if you wish to leave, you can now do so, and thank you very much for your attendance at the meeting today. And wish you a very happy Christmas as well. I probably won't see you before. Okay, so the final agenda item is the work programme, Police and Crime Panel work programme. Woke, did I say? We don't want that on the programme. I guess at this point, and I don't normally chair, but Pippa, is this really just for us to establish the work programme? Are we happy with what's on the plan? Is there anything else in particular that we want to be adding to it? Any other thoughts, views, subject areas? Jack.
Yeah, so your next is the next meeting is all about the precept, and we'll bring the papers and the papers that you spoke about in advance of that, and then we'll have the meeting in there, and ultimately there is a decision to be made around the acceptance of the precept or not. If there isn't an acceptance of it, then there's a separate meeting set aside for that, and that's 2 weeks after the one that's planned. So that's almost the agenda for that one.
And Jack, sorry, just for that, for the members, the diary date for that is the 14th of January is the pre-meet. So that's going to be the briefing ahead of the 28th for the substantive meeting.
That's correct, yeah, and obviously the timing around it, we try to usually give around about 6 weeks beforehand, but obviously the timelines are so critical and crunched around this time. So I would encourage people to attend. That's all I can do, I guess, to get heads up in relation to the figures that they're gonna be speaking about, and it gives you that opportunity. Then gives you a couple of weeks for which you can then start to think about the issues and the consultation. We will be in the middle of the consultation phase at that time, but we're probably going to the end of that consultation. Obviously, we're not going to go out to consultation until the day after, the 17th of December, to basically turn around, because we don't know what we're asking for, but we'll start the consultation then. So we'll still be in the sort of final throes of the consultation, but we'll be able to give you a heads up in relation to what the consultation is saying and telling you around it, and also the figures that we've got in there. Then on the 28th, the Commissioner will attend, and we've got the Chief Constable attending, as we usually do at this time of the year, to actually sit together and say what we need for policing for 26-27. So that's the timeline.
Thank you very much. And then the 11th of March, we've got the title in the paper. That's set. And then what happens then, Pippa, moving forward into, have we set other dates yet and other subject areas, and how does that work? Was that in train already?
Those dates aren't set yet. They'll be in draft, and then they'll go to councils to be formalised.
Jack.
Yeah, so the March one, we're doing the final deep dive into the Commissioner's plan, which is around ASB and other aspects in their crime and ASB. So that is the final pillar of the Commissioner's year as such. So it gives you that opportunity to deep dive into that area. So if there's anything you want to influence or include in there, then please let us know so we can start to adapt the paper and prep for that. There will be a pre-briefing around about 6 weeks before that. So that's the opportunity to say, this is what we're going to tell you. What would you like to hear around that? We then go into July, which is then the meeting after that, albeit I accept that the dates have not been set then, but then we're looking at the annual report and the integrity report, which are two important documents so that you need to approve, and the annual report is a statutory responsibility of the panel as well. So that's where we're at. So that's the sort of next next agenda, and then we'll go back into deep dives again and the delivery plan as we've got there. So that's the structure we're preparing for, but obviously open to any suggestions.
Thank you very much, Jack. Councillor Todd Jones and then Councillor Whelan.
Yeah, can I just clarify? I mean, the 11th of March meeting, I mean, the drill downs are really great. So tackling crime and antisocial behaviour. Oh, I'm just wondering at what level the discussions are usually pitched. I mean, we've had members ask questions about quite detailed issues of antisocial behaviour in their particular ward or city or area where it might be, and whether that's kind of the expectation. I mean, in the North City in Cambridge at the moment, in an area of an estate, Maitland and Mortford estate in East Chesterton, there's a real spike in antisocial behaviour at the moment. But is that the kind of area where that detail and geography, is that the sort of going to be considered, or is it much more of a strategic approach that we're going to be discussing?
I think if I can just come in there, Councillor Jones, the basis of the panel is to really focus in on the strategic. So we're not really going to be getting into the granular levels of ward and where spikes are. So I think on the basis of the thematic pillars thus far, it's going to be a fairly strategic approach without getting into operational detail, if that helps.
Yeah, and that was my expectation. I raised it because the other members, I don't think me up to now, have kind of got into that kind of detail. So I was just interested in how in terms of the thematic pillars, how it is pitched. And that would have been my understanding, that it is that much more.
I think it will continue in that vein. But Jack, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's obviously the delivery of the plan, delivery of a theme within a plan, and it's at a strategic level. If you have got specific issues that you want to highlight, then you can quite comfortably write to me or email me. And if there are operational matters, we will transfer them into the constabulary for their consideration. But ultimately, the role of the commissioner is to hold the chief constable to account around the totality of policing rather than different elements. So that's why we attend that. So I accept that previously we've had questions at what would be defined as operational level. Well, fine. We try to keep it at that strategic level.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Councillor Whelan.
Thank you, Chair. That's better. Would it be possible, after what the Commissioner said in his introductory remarks about the abolition of his role, to have a report to the March meeting, giving any information we've got by then and more context, and potentially setting out what we can do as a panel to support if there's anything else we need to do by then? Because I'm hoping by then we may have some more information. We don't know as to what may happen, and I'd assume that may become an ongoing thing throughout the duration of or the rest of this commissioner's term before the functions are moved.
If it's acceptable and applicable, I think it's a good idea. Could we hold it in our thoughts, because I don't know by then whether the detail will have emerged sufficiently to bring a paper to the panel. So I think we could probably keep it in very much, as an item that we want to bring for clarity for the panel, but until such time as that. Is that okay, Jack?
Yeah, well, the commissioners will be committed to keeping you updated with regards to the future of it as it develops. But at the moment, we've basically been told that the trajectory is 2028, and we're doing a lot of working out now as to what that actually means. It's still to go through legislation as well. There's the police reforms that are also tied up, and we're starting to see what's happening in relation to that. But we're committed to keeping you updated with regards to the progress, whether that's in the form of a paper or whether it's an update as the Commissioner's given today. We'll keep you updated so that we know and we keep you informed about where we're going with regards to it. But we don't know at this present time. So.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Lovely,
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions on that? No? Okay. Well, that concludes today's meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.